Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, and I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and the About the Labor podcast I actually purchased this past week, and I will not be on it. For those of you that have reached Joe Johnson fatigue, it'll be hosted by Luke Braun, Nick Olson, and Sean Borman, so check that out. Speaking of reaching Joe Johnson fatigue, Joe Oberle is also here. Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Oh, sorry. I was still sleeping off some turkey. My bad. Yeah, it was good. It was good. It's good to see. Good to see family still going through it. It's there's plenty of fatigue involved. Just goes, you got to have a beer here and a beer there, and turkey and wine, and then some beer, and then some football, and then you throw your turkey at the TV when Matt Stafford throws yet another interception.
Seriously, I mean. You know that things... Well, first of all, I just want to mention to Joe, is the editor of Purple PTSD and Vikings Territory. He writes for thesportspost.com as well. You know this season just isn't going the Vikings' way when the Lions, who aren't terrible, can't beat... Well, at least I didn't think so before yesterday. Can't beat the Bears with... Ruddy Rudiger or whatever, whoever their quarterback was.
Chase Daniels.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, their defense is great. And that corner who's had like 5 pick sixes and he's only played in, he's relatively young. He's just quickly becoming a big star, but damn it, man.
Yeah. I sat there watching the game, and the Lions actually had the lead. And I said, you know what, I shouldn't even sit here and do this and hope, because I know there's no way that the Lions can win this game. Even though they had the lead, they were playing fired up. They were like they always do on Thanksgiving. And I said, you just knew that at some point they were going to screw it up, or they were going to lion like the Lions like to do, and they did. So I didn't even get my. I kind of just watched it, and then I, with one eye, and went off and did something else, because you just knew what was going to happen, and sure enough, it did. And on top of that, I was going against the Bears defense, so much fun to see that happen.
I had Amari Cooper, which was great for me. Finally, and I played him. I should mention too that Nick Swartzen is going to be on the show on Tuesday. Talked to him this morning. It makes more sense to have him on Tuesday, post-Packers. He has some good Packers stories, and I'm assuming most people are either sleeping or out shopping, which is the conclusion that he came to. So he's definitely going to be here. He's just going to be on Tuesday. One thing I wanted to bring up from Greenway's appearance on Tuesday that I really, in the moment, enjoyed, but seeing my extended family yesterday, a lot of my brother-in-law had listened to the show, and his big takeaway from it was that it was nice to hear a football player who's still relatively close to his playing days speak openly and freely and not give football answers. And the answer that he pointed to, which my dad pointed to as well, was, which I think ties into the Lions game a little bit yesterday, was how he said, when we go to Soldier Field, all of us know in the back of our minds we'll say the right things, that we're not thinking about how we blow it there, but we always in the back of our minds we know that we always find a way to lose. And I thought that was very interesting, and almost it was headline worthy to hear a player who's only a little bit removed from this Vikings defense say something like that. And I think that ties into a lot of what's going on with the team, and just the honesty of it was amazing. And God, he would be great hosting a podcast of his own. But it ties into the narrative of the season too a little bit, don't you think?
Well, I shouldn't go off on it too much, because this is the kind of thing I've talked about for forever. Is that these guys are human, and they're probably told umpteen billion times not to read the headlines because, as Kevin McHale once told me, he says, you're not as good as they say you are, and you're just not as bad, So there's just no use there. But these guys are human. They're gonna think about these things when go back to the times that you played games in any kind of sport and you had. Had trouble. I played on a pretty good softball team, and we could never play in the wind, and we couldn't hit. And it's like it's windy out. All of a sudden, you start thinking, "Oh my God, we're in trouble today." And I think it's human. I think you can talk to yourself all you want, and the coaches can say, "Okay, we got to do this. We got to not fumble. We got to blah 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 blah." But that also plants the seed in your head, and it might dull that edge you need just to play at your peak. So when things start piling up, maybe that gets in your head. I mean, you know dang well that every Viking fan, gets worried every time the Vikings start getting closer to the championship games of either the NFC or the Super Bowl. I'll be honest. I want them to go back to the Super Bowl like nobody's business, but I know that if I ever get a chance to watch that again, I've seen 4, but I will be dreading it. Somewhere in my mind, I don't care how good they are, but there'll be this sense of dread because you can't block that stuff out of your mind if it's there. And all it takes is this, for a player, maybe all it takes is that little seed of doubt to grow, and then you make a mistake and you lose. I don't know.
People have been talking a lot this week about. You got a perfect segue for this. The recent struggles this team has had while playing in prime time, and I just saw on Reddit before the show when I was doing prep. People are saying, "Well, don't worry because the Packers have been not as bad, but in recent history, pretty bad in prime time." I think they're 0-5 on the road this season as well. Which helps. But that was something that, going back to that, I think 2015 maybe, when they played the 49ers to start the season on Monday night or Thursday night football, and they laid a big egg every primetime game so far this season. I wonder, I wish I had asked Greenway that. If they just feel, if national games feel different for them, if that comes into the conversation. I mean, I can, on a micro level, I remember when I played hockey in high school back when Minneapolis had more than one team, and we would play previews, which was a 2-period preview for the sports media, and whenever we played previews, South High School, Minneapolis South would play Southwest, and we'd get standing room only capacity at Parade North Ice Arena, and Patrick Royce would be there writing about it, and it was just different. I mean, I remember as a sophomore, I got promoted to varsity like a week before that, and they ended up benching like 4 of the defensemen. I played defense because they missed the bus, so I had to go out there at 6'2" and 120 pounds. They announced me over the PA, and it was like everyone got cheers, and me, I actually hear people saying, "Who's that?" And I'm like, ugh. And we did not win, but I have to think that, since you brought up like playing sports too, that has to be part of it. Some players, Randy Moss used to ball out, and people used to say, well, maybe he tries harder during national or primetime games. Mm-hmm. But this is coming to a head. I mean, something has to change if we really want this team to do what we want them to do.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, that you're right. Some players love the lights, and they've done it enough coming in that it doesn't bother them. Kirk Cousins was asked about this kind of thing with either primetime games or night games or some such thing on Wednesday, and he did not. He just says it's another game. He said the standard thing. Even though there has been. I read somewhere before last week's game that he had said in his past that he didn't like sitting around all day waiting for a nighttime game. Yep. And so when they asked him about it, he poo-pooed it. He says, "I don't treat it any differently. It's just a game, you blah blah blah." And so that's what they're, as Chad kind of, as you alluded to Chad, that's what they're supposed to say. They're not supposed to sow any doubt out there, among the media or the fans. And but there's got to be something to it. I mean, because if you're in, football players are people of routine, and the coaches like to keep them in their routine. And these days, the NFL, there was so much, so many primetime games and different time games than Sunday at noon that it's hard to find a routine. And so I think it's a real thing. I think it's human. I mean, if you're fired up, you're used to getting out of bed and getting ready and going to the stadium, getting ready to play, and suddenly you got to cool your heels for about 4 hours and just kind of relax. I mean, you're not the same person at the end of the day as you are at the beginning of the day. Yeah. It's natural thing.
And it's so much easier to wake up and go do something as opposed to having that time to doubt yourself.
That's right.
It is a completely different ballgame. This is so stupid, and I'm not saying it's on the same level at all, but doing Morning Joes is a lot less emotionally difficult for me because I just wake up and do the show as opposed to the Wednesday night show. I have time to sit around and get nervous. So, you could see that.
I got to challenge that because it's tougher for me because I usually don't drink at 9:30 in the morning. So
that's a bold new world that as someone who used to do that.
It may be an advantage for the Vikings this week because like I was talking about routine. Well, they got themselves in the routine for a night game last week. Now they stay in that same routine. So maybe that helps.
That's true.
To then, this is what I did last week to prepare. This is what I'm going to do. Most of the similar stuff from the coaching staff on down to the players. They maybe know a little bit better. Okay, I didn't pace my brain this week, last week, so maybe I will this week. So I have no idea. But this game seems to me like an analytical nightmare because you have so many analytical trends that conflict one another. You have the Packers being 0-5. You have the fact that Cousins plays better, at least up until last week, on the road. You have the primetime struggles of each team. And I think it goes back to what you said. That's why they play the game, and that's why we like the game, is because you can't really predict, with any certainty what's going to happen. I mean, even teams that, like the Chiefs or the Rams, there's always that 20% chance that they'll lose. And I think that the NFL, more than any other sport, has that sort of parody to it. Did you know that Kirk Cousins has a podcast? He's alluded to it, or some people have. Yeah, I have. I haven't listened to it, but I hear his answers on Wednesday each week out at TCO, and I'll be honest, I don't quote him a lot because he does give he gives decent answers, but they're not canned, but they're vanilla. He's not going to do anything that's going to raise the ire of the other team. He's not going to ever throw any of his teammates under the bus. He bats back a lot of questions. Like every week he says, I hate to sound like a broken record, but, every game's important. When they tried to ask him about last week being important, they tried to ask him about this week being important, and then the week before, and he will not say anything other than what you're supposed to say. And so given that, I haven't sought it out, to be honest. So I have not listened to it. I know he has this little TV show, or I think they film it too. So
they've done that, and then it looks like he's done some stuff where it's just like us, but he does video. Oh yeah, he is at TCO, but his co-host is at home sometimes. So basically, he's just on a headset like I am. I found that very interesting because I did not know that, and a listener of ours asked if Greenway was going to do a show with us because Greenway had alluded to wanting to do a show, and then he said you should try to get Cousins to do a show on your network, and that would never happen just based on his affiliation with the team. But I thought that was interesting just because I can't imagine. I mean, you would think that he has to give some non-canned answers at some point during that podcast, because it's like his childhood friend. that he's talking to. But I thought that was really cool.
I should give it a listen just for that reason, because he there was one week he did say something and it got a little play around, other news outlets because it was something a little bit more candid than usual. And so, I think, maybe I should give it a chance just because he's probably saving it up, his good stuff there, because that's his brand, and that's understandable. But
it's definitely in my list of things to listen to. It's called Officialize for people that haven't heard of it. It's officialize.com, or just Google Kirk Cousins podcast.
Big Ten questions.
I know. It was definitely a very awkward Thanksgiving because I did not ask Greenway any Big Ten questions, and I think my dad disowned me. Just complete silence. One question that doesn't really apply to what we're talking about, but we have some extra time today. That we didn't. I'm trying to think of the timeline of when we did 3 Deep and when the Adrian Peterson child abuse thing broke. The sites existed for sure because I was up at like 2 a.m. when I heard that news break that had happened, and I initially covered it, but I think it was a year before we started podcasting. And it came out this week that AP said that he still physically punishes his kids, that he uses a belt and a switch sometimes. And, we've discussed this a little bit on the show, saying that, I said that he kind of got caught up in that Ray Rice situation where maybe it wouldn't have been as big of a deal. Otherwise, I saw some of the pictures, and they were bad, but I think I always go back to what somebody's intent is, and there's a difference, and it doesn't excuse it 100%, I'm not saying that, but there is a difference in what his intent was versus what Ray Rice's intent was. And, clearly maybe he shouldn't be doing that because he's super strong, but at the same time, it wasn't, I don't think it was like... we live in Minneapolis, so it's hard to say. People don't spank their kids anymore. I was spanked with a wooden spoon growing up. If I had kids, I probably would either spank them or have my wife spank them.
You're saying that post Thanksgiving because you wouldn't get any pumpkin pie.
My dad almost took the switch to me yesterday. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not trying to excuse it. I just think it's not that big of a deal. I think it's hard to say it's a cultural thing because then people say, well, that's a culture of abuse. But, some people still spank their kids. I'm not anti-spanking. So I just wanted your take on that because we haven't really ever discussed it.
Once again, I just shake my head. First of all, for guys in our business, it was a segment filler. I guess I'm not certainly not happy about it, but certainly something to talk about. I was really bothered by it when it happened. I remember how I handled my kids. I mean, I was spanked growing up. I remember watching my older brother. We'd be in a line. First he would get it, and then I would, and I got to watch. And thankfully, twice the board that my dad used broke on my brother's ass, so I got out of it. But
I tried to hide the wooden spoon from my mom once before she got home from work, and that was the worst idea.
So that's how I was raised, and therefore when I was bringing up my kids, I remember spanking my son the first time and swatting him on the butt with my hand, and I thought, God, that didn't feel right. I did it because that's what I knew, and so I almost did it instinctively. But then I did it, and I said, no, that's not right. And we never did it again, in our household for these kids. And so that's where I really got to shake my head. I was kind of excused of AP a little bit because of how he was brought up, and hear those stories. And
yeah,
this was what came naturally to him. Okay, good.
Texas.
Give you that. But I think the first time if you're I'm not going to say a deeper thinking person, but to a certain degree that's the case. The first time you haul off and pull a branch off a tree and start swatting, wailing on your kid, and you do what he did, you got to take a step back and say, maybe this isn't such a good thing. And then
especially if it's breaking the skin.
Yes, yeah, breaking the skin in the places that he did, to the point where a doctor says, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" Then you get roasted in the media. You get suspended. You lose money. You have this national embarrassment at your hands. Don't you take a step back and say, "I think I got to figure out something different"?
Yeah, I should have put that in there too. Like I don't understand how he brought that up or answered that question so truthfully, or why he's still doing it.
That's the thing. That's the next step. A is the thing you learn from your mistakes. The world has changed, and you should probably figure out a different way to discipline your kids. Well, then he goes and continues to do it, and then he says he continues to do it. Yeah. Now, that's stupid pride, I guess. I do know AP, when he gets talking to the media, he'll talk and probably doesn't – I don't know, but at some point, maybe you don't include that in, so that you just rile all this stuff up. But he was saying, I'm not going to basically let anything stand in the way of me and disciplining my kids. Oh, just shut up. Why? Why are you doing this?
To me, I feel like, and you've ingrained in me as like my writing mentor not to really get into stuff like this. And Greenway did talk about that too, the difference between like coverage and personal stuff.
Yep.
But I do get a sense, and my take always was, considering the amount of kids he has out of wedlock, maybe he's overcompensating by, like, he's not around that often, so when he is, he tries to over-discipline or over-dad these kids. And I know there's a difference between, like, the kids he has with his wife and, like, the kid that he had in South Dakota or wherever that passed away. But
I certainly think that's a factor, Joe. I certainly think, I certainly think that adds into all of this, because if you're a part-time dad, and I don't know how that is, but I know that some kids try to get away with other stuff when they're basically with one parent all the time, and they go down to here and they maybe push the boundaries. I don't know. So yeah, that's got to be contributory. I would agree.
Yeah, but yeah,
that doesn't excuse it.
No, not at all. No, and it almost makes it worse, because that's their experience then with him. And I should have put out there that at this point, the amount of money that he lost from that, and that's a really gross way to say it, but you think that would contribute to him not doing it. But this is a guy who still has a parade in his hometown for him every year. That hasn't changed. Granted, websites like purplejesus.com disappeared afterwards, and everything changed for him here. But you never know. Maybe he latched onto the South versus the North, and a lot of people saying this is, a Southern black thing, and that white people have no right to criticize. It's just such a complex issue, and it's at the end of the day, it's kind of gross.
That's right. Nobody can tell you how to discipline your kids, but I think at some point you take a step back and you look at it and ask yourself, is this right? You
nailed it. If a doctor takes pictures, you're doing it wrong. There's a difference there. But speaking of people I'd like to hit with a switch, the Vikings are facing the Packers. After playing the Bears, I think we said, at least I said on a show recently, that in this stretch of games, we all said that this would determine the season. I said that I'd be ecstatic, and this is not a spicy take or anything, but if they went 3-1, that would be great. So that means basically they have to win this game. They have to beat Seattle, who's like a half game behind them in the wild card, and they are going to have to go face the Patriots, who, Tom Brady's been on I think he's had 0 or 1 touchdown in every game in the last 4 or 5 games, so he's been uncharacteristically cold. We discussed this a little bit.
Joe, I think you need to take the C off of that word. I think he's been uncharacteristically old.
Yeah, that's part of it. But he went to the Big Ten, so I got to put that out there. And I know how much you hate the adage of a must win, but I think you even agreed on the Purple Journal podcast Wednesday night that this is definitely, if there is such a thing, that this is it. Mathematically they're still in it, but they got to win this game.
I only hate it because it's a cliche. It at some points it's true, which most cliches are. They have some truth to them, but it most certainly is. I wrote in my preview that the winner's gonna move on in their journey towards the playoffs. The other one's gonna just float downstream off into irrelevance. And I really think that's the case. The Packers, if they lose, they will be continuing the concern over their coach. It will magnify. They will be calling for Mike McCarthy's head. If they win, he lives to coach another week. I mean, not they're going to do it mid-season, but I think he has to win this one and keep them on the playoff trail. And they are not the same team that they usually are. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is still great, but he's not 100%. He probably doesn't run as much. He's been sacked 30 times this year, which is like sixth most in the league. And Aaron Jones has come. We'll talk about that later, but Aaron Jones has come in and helped out the running game. But the defense is gettable, and especially against the run. So it's they have to win it. The Vikings have to win it. So that's why it's going to be a huge deal on Sunday night. It's going to be rocking it. I think there's with Thanksgiving week and the fact that the Vikings lost to the Bears, there's a little luster come off this game. But I think by the time Sunday comes around, people are going to be totally into it, and they'll probably be pretty lubed up on Sunday night.
So speaking of Tom Brady, he said something, and he said this before, but he said something a few weeks ago about the fact that if the Patriots had Aaron Rodgers would throw for 7,000 yards every season, and that started this conversation about the legacy of Rodgers and really the legacy of Mike McCarthy. And it reminds me of 2009. I always hated Childress. I didn't like, I know they brought him in to be the new sheriff in town after the sex boat thing, and I thought he overdid that. I didn't like Troy Williamson at all. He was like my Treadwell back then, but finding him for going to a funeral was just like, God, this guy's just a douche. And he got an extension part of the way through 2009 because of Favre, and I thought, well, now Favre's going to be gone, and we're going to be stuck with this guy in perpetuity, especially if we win a Super Bowl, which I'll be fine with because we will have won that Super Bowl. But I felt at the time that we would have won it despite Childress. And I feel like, strangely, McCarthy and Childress are similar in that way, and they're tied together too because they were both hired the same year. The Packers kind of hoodwinked the Vikings and pretended like they were going to hire Childress when they didn't want to, so the Vikings pounced on Childress early, if I remember that correctly.
I think so.
Yeah, and so, I feel like maybe McCarthy has stifled Rodgers. I mean, that's the sense I get from the Packers fans that I do interact with. That's
what they say, and there's some they're not exactly on the same page with each other, but as far as comparing Childress to McCarthy, I really think McCarthy's a nice guy. I mean, I don't know if Childress is or not. I never really covered him that much. Maybe one season when he was still there, that last crazy season 2010, I got covered a little bit of that.
Donovan McNabb. Ugh.
Yeah, and Randy Moss returns and that whole scene. But
that killed me, by the way. Can I just put that out there?
What's that?
When they brought Moss back and then they got rid of him after 3 games, that killed me. I understand that he flipped out on the caterers or whatever, but in retrospect, at one time the Vikings had Favre, Moss, Percy Harvin, and AP. like that's a all-time Madden team that I would put together.
Yes,
They played that Jets game.
Mask goes into New England and then has a press conference and tells everybody that he'd rather be playing for the team.
Yeah.
Than yours. I'm sorry, you're done.
Yeah.
You don't want to play for this team.
Yeah.
The catering thing is the final straw. It's like, okay, this is our way out. But when he does that, it's like, what are you doing, dude? You know?
Yeah. I am an apologist for him, but yeah, that was bad. I can't pretend like it wasn't.
Anyway, I mean, every week, every time there's a Packers game, we talk to one player and the coach in a conference call, and McCarthy just seems like a very decent dude, and he's, the Packers and their fans, they expect to win every year. They expect, if they're not in the conversation for the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl, it's a failure. And while they have one of the best quarterbacks ever to play the game right now, and they've only got one Super Bowl with him, I get where you throw some blame on that to the coach. You have to put some blame on that on Ted Thompson, the people that built those teams around Rodgers.
Definitely.
And they did, and he's gone. But it took them long enough. It's for the Packer fans I talk to, it's all about the in-game decisions. He has some questionable challenges and non-challenges. He has some questionable time management. He has some play calling that they struggle with, and certainly it seems that Rodgers does. And they just signed Rodgers to a big contract. They're not going to let him go. So McCarthy's got to be having his head on a swivel, I think, because if he doesn't win this game, his walking papers may be signed.
Yeah, and you're so right. I feel like Ted Thompson, I think, is more responsible just in the fact that he thought that they could compete without free agency,
right?
Which is insane to me. Before we get into the 5 furious facts, I wanted to quickly just point out the remaining schedules for each team. So after Sunday, the Packers play Arizona, Atlanta, the Bears, the Jets, and the Lions. And the Vikings play the Patriots, Seahawks, Dolphins, Lions, Bears. So they have a little bit of an easier schedule too, which contributes to the winningness of this situation. Yeah. So stuff has gotten really dark this week in Vikings fandom. I mean, people are calling for coaches to be fired. I think Nick Olson from our Vikings territory side, who's going to be on the new About the Labor podcast, summed it up in a tweet saying, everybody's calling for DeFilippo to be fired, but it's for reasons like he runs too much, he doesn't run enough, he's too aggressive, he's too conservative. So basically he summed it up by saying everyone wants him fired, but no one can agree on why. And that seems like a bit much.
I will say this about the whole DeFilippo, and just listening to Zimmer in his press conference this week, where he says there's too much volume and there's maybe we should be more of a running team or something like this. I just sit there and scratch my head. I mean, this is the head coach talking, and I know he's the defensive guy, but he must just say, "Okay, Flip, here's the offense, go after it."
He does.
What I want to see, and I know we talked about this on Tuesday and even last week. I mean, how does he not know more what they're planning to do and have a clue? Maybe he is so focused and drilled down into the defense that he doesn't get a chance to look up and see what's happening on offense until the fourth quarter of the game.
I am so glad that you bring that up, just because something that has bothered me all season, which I can put in a great context. Okay, so there's a small echo on our shows, and we're trying to troubleshoot to see why that echo is. And
because their takes are so good, they should be heard twice.
I'll take that. And so I've moved the microphone away from my mouth because everything comes through me, so it's louder. And we're thinking maybe the sound comes from the ear and then is in my microphone, and so you hear it again a little bit. And when I moved the microphone away from my face, the first thing I thought of was Zimmer. Because when the Vikings have the ball, every time they show him on the sideline, he moves the microphone away from his face and up. Like he moves it so it goes into mute. Most headsets will put you on mute when you move the microphone up. And I've always thought, like, shouldn't you at least be contributing or agreeing or giving some sort of feedback on the plays? Rewatch any game from this season. When the Vikings have the ball, he puts the headset on mute mode, and that just seems to me to be, I understand that he has to delegate, that's not his where he's most comfortable or comfortable at all, that he's giving a lot of power to that offensive coordinator, but you think that he would have some sort of feedback, especially as a guy who is a defensive guru and can say, okay, well, I understand what you're calling, but I see this, the defense is doing this, and so maybe we should audible or whatever, you know what I mean? It's just...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting point. I've never really noticed that. I don't know how the logistics of the things work. Maybe they don't want to hear him swearing and cussing while they're trying to call the offense. But isn't DiFilippo on the sidelines with him, that if he's got something to say, he can go over and say it to him?
He could.
You might have a point there. I don't know why he would do that. I don't know. Does that? I mean, maybe can he pull it back down if he does have something to say?
No, he most definitely could. But it just means that he's definitely giving less feedback than other head coaches.
You're right. I would agree with you. It's interesting how in this league that you have all these new coaches or coaches that for some time now have not just been the Bud Grant type who sits there and he gives his OC and DC their duties, and then he goes and manages the game from an objective point of view and doesn't really get involved. You've got Sean McVay calling offensive plays. You got Mike McCarthy, Andy Reid, all these. It's really interesting if they've come to their head coaching position from a certain discipline. They are sticking with that. And they are not, they figure they're doing that. They know that better than anybody else. It's for an older viewer like me, it's a change than what we were used to back in the day.
Like a Paterno sitting up in the press
Correct. Box,
kind of being like leading an orchestra a little bit more than play calling.
So I don't know, if it's interesting to hear you say that he, almost mutes himself in this process completely, and I don't know.
I should do like a tweet or an article where I show examples of that, because I haven't seen that anywhere, and that would at least be worth discussing with people out in the know. But just so I know, or just so the readers or the listeners and readers know, I mean, are you with me on this? The idea of firing DiFilippo is insane.
Yes. Oh God, yes. I was on KTOE radio this morning, and we were talking about that, and they brought up, should Zimmer be on the hot seat? In fact, I just wrote a story for the Sports Post on coaches on the hot seat. Certainly include Mike McCarthy in there, but at the end I included Mike Zimmer.
Welcome to the club.
For the sole purpose of discounting the fact that he should be on the hot seat. The guy from the Daily Norseman wrote a piece saying he should be, and I said, this is wrong. He's not going anywhere. They've got a new OC and a new quarterback. They got to get these guys together, and it's a 3-year plan. It's at least a 3-year plan. I think you're going to see better synergy out of them next year if DiFilippo hangs around, and I think he has not earned a coaching position, head coach job yet. On this,
I think that narrative is gone, which is a positive.
Yes. I don't think they should fire him. I think it's silly to say that Zimmer should be on the hot seat. The defense is built here, and the way the team is following his lead, his demeanor, what he's building here. He doesn't rule an iron fist, but he's kind of an old school type guy, and I think. What he's building here is good. It would be really short-sighted to do anything for. I mean, he took this team from 7-9 to the NFC Championship last year in 4 years or whatever. So I think it's silly.
Last season was magical. They had a lot of stuff just happen that were really antithetical to the Vikings as a whole. Lucky stuff. Balls bouncing their way, winning, starting 2-2 and then winning all but one of their remaining games. I think a lot of us knew that wasn't going to be replicated. That maybe was a year or two ahead of schedule. A lot of the Bears.
Now, I mean, look at the Jaguars. You know, they're a 6-game losing streak, for crying out loud, and they should have won. They should have been in the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, and all the Vikings need to do. You know, you look at Brian O'Neill grading out as the best offensive lineman last week. That's a huge plus, huge surprise, really, just based on like what he looked like in training camp. And if they can just add a couple more guys, you know, a left guard, guys that you can snag late in the first round. Or in later rounds, you know, guards aren't really first-round guys unless you're, you know, in the 20s. So that's all they really need to do. I feel like they've had, nothing else, this team has shown the depth that they have. We've had a ton of conversations about, you know, next man up, Eric Wilson, Curse, Harris. You know, that's huge.
The next coach up this year because the offensive line coach died before the season started, you know?
Yeah. And that you got to wonder how much that affected the line, too.
Absolutely. And, you know, I was reminded as well, Ben Gessling wrote a good story in the Star Tribune today on the running game. And he reminded me that they lost both their offensive guards, you know, Joe Berger and Nick Easton, who were two of the best offensive linemen last year, and so they've been scrambling since then to, you know, and Nick Easton should be on the line, you know. Then, you know, he should be playing there, and he had, you know, put in a season next to Elfline, and they had a good thing going. So it's like there are plenty of things going on here, but they've got to get it. You know, you got to be patient. You got to be patient. I don't think that's coaching. If you look at everything this team has gone through, and that, you know, people can say those are excuses. You have to get around that. Damn it, they're humans. You know, I don't care what you know. When people start dying and people start retiring and leaving, and it's not exactly standard operating procedure. You didn't have that happen for the Rams. You didn't have that happen for the Saints. You know, they saw what they did last year. They got fired up. The Saints did because they knew they should have won that game, and they said, okay, we'll tweak here, tweak there, and keep right on going. And Drew Brees is playing like a man who's near the end of his career, and he's just a house of fire. And, you know,
MVP.
Meanwhile, I got a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback, so you got to give it a little time. That's
losing Berger, he was the best lineman that the Vikings had, and that was a gigantic hole to fill. You know, and I found it interesting that Kamara said in the offseason and then before the Saints played the Eagles that they would have kicked the Eagles' ass last year had the Vikings not pulled that miracle out of their own ass. And that, you know, a different season, obviously. Eagles aren't playing like they did last year. Nope. But, yeah, that was the biggest point spread of any defending Super Bowl champ ever. They just got completely embarrassed.
I mean, let's look at what this little window of excellence that Nick Foles had in his entire career. I mean, I don't think you will ever hear from him again, but for 5 games, he was incredible.
People in Philly will. I'm sure he'll open a bunch of car dealerships and people will love him forever, but yeah, you're right.
You need some luck. You need some things to go your way. You need some divine intervention sometime, because the better quarterback was on the sidelines and now he's playing this year and not as good. I mean, make sense of all that.
Strike when you have your opportunity, and this is where the Vikings have faltered. When you have that opportunity, you have to take advantage of it, because rarely does it extend into the next year. You know, dynasties outside of the Patriots, we've gotten used to that, but
yeah, look at the Packers. Shouldn't they have won more? I mean, the year they won the Super Bowl, they won from a 6th seed in the playoffs, and they just got hotter than a pistol and went all the way through the playoffs and they won, and they haven't really sniffed it since. I mean, I think did they play in a second Super Bowl with Rodgers and lose? No, I don't think so. I don't think he's been back, has he?
No, I don't think so. Favre, yes, but
yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's 16 games. It's teams that are all, virtually, they're very similar in their talent level, and I think we all get caught up in numbers and and look at these guys as this should happen because this did happen. And, to a certain degree, that's true. But, boy, when it comes on Sunday, you got that odd-shaped ball bouncing around, and so many things can happen, and injuries are such a huge factor. Look at, hopefully, well, I shouldn't say that, but Trubisky, if he's out for a couple more weeks, they may have a little trouble. They should have been beaten yesterday, but
what's the word on that? I thought I heard that they were confident he'd be back, but it would be really great if he wasn't. But I've said this last couple of weeks, maybe that's what the Vikings need. Maybe they need to be the 5-6 seed. Maybe they need to fight their way through and find some camaraderie that way, not take that week off.
Zimmer hates the when everybody's got the spotlight on him. He likes being an underdog anyway.
Big time. Let's get into the Friday's Five Furious factoids.
Well, yes, let's do that. And I guess I have to say right out of the gate, I cannot believe that Surly Furious hasn't sponsored this.
I know.
Because we could surely say Furious out with a word if we want.
But that's your it's perfect there, and there is no more surly podcast in the game than us. So it makes sense on multiple levels.
All right, I'll fire through these. The Vikings that rushed the ball 14 times for 22 yards and a 1.6 against the Bears. That has to change. Oh, my God. I mean, I can feel the heat building around me for that take. It's so hot.
So I said this earlier in the week, but I guess the Vikings have done once in the last 21 years have they rushed for under 25 yards as a team, and they've done it twice this season.
Damn. That's bad. Anyway, that could change this week, and that's the second fact, is the Packers are ranked 26th in the league against the run, giving up 126.1 a game. So I think you're going to see the Vikings try to establish that, see them use some clock with their running game to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field, and they should be able to get through with that. I mean, the Packers have a halfway decent pass defense, yardage-wise anyway. So, I mean, it's not great, but it's better than this. And so I think that's where you see the Vikings.
Yeah, I saw an article today, I think it was on Fansided, that was like dissecting Dalvin Cook's sophomore slump, and it seems like, well, he hasn't played enough for that to be true, and so, yeah, I'm really hoping, and he had that huge run in that game, so it's not like the couple games we've seen him, he's been completely worthless. But I'm hoping, he has a big game.
I was talking to on the radio this morning, and the host brought up the fact that he's had, 2 touchdowns and 3 fumbles or something the other way around this season or something like that. And it was like, it was maybe it's 3 games he's got 2 fumbles. I don't know, but it's just bad. And I just said, well, I would really like, since they're not finding any room up the middle because of the guard play, perhaps for him to run, get him out in the flat and get him out, throw some screens to this dude.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Ball in space and let him do his thing, because get him to the second level. He's something else, but they haven't been able to get him there. Now, granted, it's just all a small sample size, but still, do something different with him besides running through the tackles.
Definitely, completely agree.
Next one, the tale of 2 Aarons. First, Aaron Jones has 5 TDs in the past 4 weeks since he's taken over the running back position. And this was kind of interesting because the Packer fans were screaming for that to happen.
Big time.
Ever since he got back off his suspension, and having, I had both him and Williams on a couple of my teams. I kind of handcuffed them for fantasy purposes, just waiting for them to do this as well. And once they finally did, they saw how valuable he is. And I think he's not as good as pass catcher and maybe pass protector as Williams is. So I'm sure that's why they had, they were splitting time. But it's clear now that the thing they want to do is to feed this guy the ball quite a bit and keep people.
So I found a stat about Jones where he's averaging 6.4 yards per carry, and he has 5 rushing touchdowns and 1 receiving touchdown. So he has 6 touchdowns total. That's 6.4 is like Alvin Kamara-esque. And it makes you wonder why they were. What was that guy's name that fumbled the game away? Ty Montgomery, maybe.
Yes.
And then why they weren't using him more?
Yes, I agree with you. I'm not sure either, and maybe that's part of that's game planning. That's offensive game planning, which comes under Mike McCarthy's purview. So maybe that's why the Packer fans are frustrated, and it seems to have some merit there. But they've corrected it, and it's been good for them ever since, and kind of good for me too. So my problem is what I'm going to do on Sunday, because I don't like to play.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't like to play other opposing players, especially Packers, against the Vikings. I don't like splitting my loyalties, but I may have to have a ghost fantasy football manager do that one for me. So anyway, Aaron Rodgers is the other. Aaron has 19 touchdowns against 1 interception. Karimany, him and Breeze.
He has 1 pick all year.
Yeah, actually, Drew Brees threw his 2nd pick last night. But Rodgers is amazing. He's been sacked 30 times this year, which is tied for 6th in the league. So the defensive line needs to get after him. He's not he's not going to be Trubisky like as he has been in the past. He's better. His knee's better than he was than we saw him in week 2. And he still played well, but he's not the same guy that we've seen in years past. And I've seen him short arm some passes and just do some things that are un-Aaron-like.
Yeah, so, the 4th and 2 everyone was mad about last week. I think on 3rd and 2 he threw it into the dirt for no reason, stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's going to be the key to the game for me. I mean, you got to slow down this offense. The Vikings will get their points against the Packers. But they've got to slow them down and keep them off the scoreboard as much as possible. And finally, in the first game against the Packers, that infamous tie, Kirk Cousins was 35 of 48 for 425 yards, 4 TDs, 1 pick, 1.8 QB rating.
Best game as a Viking.
Yeah, so granted it was an overtime game, but so he got a little a more run out of it. It doesn't matter. He was great in that game.
Yeah.
In fact, he brought it up when people were asking him about on Wednesday. He said I played pretty good then. Well, we'll find that again. Kirk, let's go. And that was without. Was Dalvin Cook in that game, or is that the game he got injured? I think that was the game he got injured.
Yeah, he didn't. If he played, it was very, very little.
So I'd love to see some of that. I'd love to see them just get aggressive as heck and go out there and I know you predicted the score on Purple Journal podcast. That was a big offensive explosion for the Vikings.
Yeah.
Even though I want you to win, I'd love to see that happen. So.
Yeah. I think I said 31-18, maybe more.
Did. Yeah. I said 4. I can't remember.
I feel like there's a lot of frustration, and if there's going to be a get-right game, as hard as it'll be against the Packers, a divisional game, primetime game, I think that this will be the game that they can do that. I think having Barr come back, it will be huge, just in case, they have to contain Rodgers. Because he's so deadly, breaking out of the pocket and rolling out and extending plays. But yeah, that's more wishful. God, it's a lot of wishful thinking. Just because I am not ready to cover a team that's kind of looking into the draft, in a week or two. And so I do think that this team can and has shown that they can play with anybody. A lot of people, that's why I found it out that so many people are off the bandwagon, because yes, they haven't beaten a team with a winning record, but these so-called, invincible teams like the Rams and the Saints, they limited Drew Brees in the season that'll probably end up being his MVP year to 125 yards?
Yep.
It's just turnovers.
It is.
And that's...
Turnover's been killing them.
I always do the 3 ways the Vikings will win. I was going to cover getting Cook started. I forget what the other one was, I think, because I'm walking away from my agenda. But I really just want to say the main one is turnovers. That's what's killed this team. I want to see Cousins do what he talks about, which is that's my number one focus, so on and so forth. Not all of these are his fault per se, but this is the game where he's going to have to show he's worth that money in some way, shape, or form. So limit the turnovers, please.
And that's just an interesting thing. I've sat there and watched him get asked about this week after week, and he's said a number of things that have I thought made sense. One of them is that so many things can happen on a play that can cause a turnover. It's not all just the carelessness of the quarterback. And I wonder, there's only a few things you can do, I think, to limit turnovers. I mean, they got AP to start carrying the ball different when he was having problems with them way back in 2009, and it helped him a bit. I think you can have, Kurt can be more mindful of that when he goes through the line and maybe put two hands on the ball. But other than that, there's so much unspecific, scripted or things that happen that can cause fumbles and turnovers. It's so random, I guess is the word.
So many variables that can, yes. If one goes wrong, it's a turnover. I know what you mean.
So it's like you can talk about it and you can focus on it until you're blue in the face, what have you. But at the end, you're going to get some. If you walk out there trying to run the play, thinking, "Oh, I better not fumble," oh my God, that play is going to break down in a minute.
Yeah.
And so it's such a difficult thing to do, but you have to figure out a way. I don't know if you can figure out a way, but you just have to, do what you can and then play your game. You can't be thinking about, it's like a golfer trying to think about 20 different swing thoughts as he pulls the club back. It's just going to screw it up,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a weird thing, but you're right. They have to figure out a way to not fumble. I don't know how, but maybe it's block better. Maybe it's protect better. Maybe it's Kirk Cousins to get a better read and not throw into triple coverage to Laquan Treadwell.
That was my third thing was get Thielen going again.
Yeah.
And limit these. I don't know if that pick six was Treadwell's fault. We talked about that in the Purple Journal podcast, but he's been a party in a couple of these devastating interceptions, and there's got to be something there. When there's smoke, there's fire,
Yeah, he doesn't get as much separation, and I don't know that he's a great fighter for the ball. I mean, Thielen's going to go. He's going to go up there and try. Every ball is an opportunity for him, and he's going to fight till it hits the ground. So,
and I don't
see that in Treadwell.
Yes, and I don't want to keep murdering this dead horse, but the reason that the first thing I said in the draft chat for Treadwell's draft, the first thing I said was anyone but Treadwell, and the reasoning behind it was he is a one-trick pony, and that trick is supposedly that he's good at coming down with contested catches, and that made sense with Teddy Bridgewater because Teddy was throwing a lot of just button hook passes. That's all it really was in his repertoire. So you think a guy that can run 12 yards, turn around, and get the ball most of the time is perfect in that offense. But if you look at his combine, he's not fast. He was in the bottom 15th percentile in regards to both his upper body strength and his vertical jump, and those are things that you think he should be good at. And so my number one thing was he's a one-trick pony, and that trick doesn't work in the NFL because the corners are stronger than him, they're faster than him, but they're smaller, but they can jump higher than he can. And so I think that's played out. He shows some flashes of being a decent third guy, which is disgusting considering he's a first-round pick, but at some point they got to just maybe go to BB, or we've seen a little bit more of Aldrick Robinson. Luke put that on the over/under, and maybe that's the way to go. Who knows? But enough with Treadwell already.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the last days and times of Treadwell as a Viking pretty soon.
I don't know. He's got one more year in his contract. He's not getting extended. There's no way. But yeah, my prediction was the Vikings win. I did predict the Vikings loss against the Bears. I feel really gross about that, but I do think that they're going to win this game because they have to. It's at home. They should have won the first game, and we have a better kicker this time, which is very important. Even though Daniel Carlson has found new life in Oakland / Las Vegas. 31-18 was my score, and I think you were a little bit more conservative.
24-20.
Yeah.
Might be a little low. Might be a little low. I'd love to see him light up that place and a little bit offensive display. But I want to see some defense and stop Rodgers. You know, I mean, they're going to get some points. But I don't want Rodgers to get it. I want the other Aaron to get it. Oh my God!
And I think Luca analyzed like why you're so good at predictions and why you beat me so much, and that is your sweet spot, that 24 to 20, 21 range.
Right.
Which I thought, and I still would like to think that bringing in someone like Cousins, the opposing score would be similar or less than, and the Vikings would be putting up just tons and tons of points.
They should be this week. That defense is not as good as the Bears. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, and Clinton Dix is gone, which might help. So we'll see. We'll be doing a pregame show, perhaps with Jordan as the host. I think Tyler and I are going to make an appearance down at Eric the Reds for Chad Greenway's Grey Duck Vodka tasting event. It's a tailgating event. It's free.
Yeah, he was awesome on Tuesday. He was awesome.
Yeah. And I'll be plugging Grey Duck for a while just because it's a great product. He's a really cool dude. Swartzen is going to be there too, and he'll be on the show on Tuesday, as I mentioned earlier. He was almost on the show today, but he felt like Tuesday made more sense since it's Black Friday and a lot of people are just hungover from turkey or really hungover.
Sleeping or shopping, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
So hopefully after we get off the air, we have our parents all tuned in for this one. So.
Check us out. Check out the About the Labor postgame show. That'll be on Sunday night. We're super excited about that. Super pumped to see Luke hosting the show. He's definitely earned it, and that's a pretty in-depth group of guys. The brand of About the Labor is very statistically and X's and O's intensive, so it's probably the best real football breakdown if you're into that sort of stuff. They really get into what worked and what didn't and why the team won or lost. But this has been the Morning Joe's Thanksgiving edition. Hope to catch you guys on Tuesday when Nick Swartzen will be here, and there's still time. We are doing like we did with Greenway, a gnome giveaway. So if you ask a question on our Twitter or Facebook or Reddit that we end up asking Nick Swartzen on the air, we'll send you a gnome. But thanks for listening. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. And let's go Vikings. Let's beat them Packers. Skol.